The rusty sign said Miller's Creek, 12 miles, but the car's GPS insisted on showing only a green void, as if the road had been swallowed by the forest. It was early autumn in the countryside. Washington's to teeth a kind of damp cold that doesn't quite snow, but gets into your bones and makes you clench your shoulders without realizing it. The Chevrolet Impala, the black car, drove slowly, its headlights cutting through the fog that clung to the tall trees. In the driver's seat, Eddie Revash kept both hands on the steering wheel as if he were controlling something bigger than a car. He was in his early 30s, with a thin face, restless eyes, and a faint scar on his left eyebrow. The kind that sounds like a story, but really just says bar fight. Next to, Marcus Mac Hollish was chewing gum with his mouth open, his elbow resting on the window. He was broader, heavier, wearing a gray jacket and possessing an artificial calmness, like someone who jokes to avoid thinking. In the back seat, Tanya Reed held her cell phone, which had no signal, and fiddled with it anyway, as if habit could conjure up a network bar out of nowhere. She had a dry, focused manner, and her eyes scanned everything: signs, entrances, the line of trees. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. See, Mac pointed with his chin toward the darkness between the tree trunks. Nobody lives here. Perfect spot. Eddie didn't answer immediately. His breath made vapor fly through the glass. Perfect place to disappear to, he said finally. You remember that, right? Tanya let out a short sound, almost a laugh. We're not going to disappear. We go in, grab what we can, and leave. That's it. It was always the phrase they tried to use to turn the absurd into routine. They weren't there for the adrenaline rush. They weren't kids doing a dare. They were there because Ezekiel had spat all three out, each in their own way. Eddie with overdue rent and an eviction notice posted on his door. Mac with an old truck out of commission, no money for repairs, owing money to people who collected debts by hand. Tanya with her name flagged in a system that denied jobs before you even sat down for an interview. The plan didn't start as a plan. It started as a conversation. In the early hours of the morning, in a supermarket parking lot, with bad coffee and that kind of hunger that's not just for food. Someone commented about remote houses, rich people fleeing to cabins in the middle of nowhere, with more weapons than common sense. Mac laughed. Tanya searched. Eddie pretended he didn't want to, but he was the first to ask where. And that's how they arrived at an address that seemed made up a secondary road, then another, then a stretch of dirt track that could hardly be called a road. The house appeared almost suddenly, as if the forest had opened a clearing just for it. It was large, dark wood, with a sloping roof, wide windows with thick curtains, a long porch to empty rocking chairs. Behind it, a separate garage. No lights on, no cars in front, no sound except the wind. Look at this, Mac whistled softly. This is the house of people who don't want to be found. Eddie parked the Impala a safe distance away, between trees, so that the car was hidden from the road. The engine shut off and silence came like a living thing. Tanya opened the door slowly, as if afraid the creaking would give her away. The air was colder outside, and it smelled of damp earth and leaves. She looked up, searching for cameras. I can't see anything, she said, but she didn't sound relieved. Mac opened the trunk and took out a backpack. There were no firearms in it. It wasn't that kind of story, at least not the way people romanticize it. There were gloves, small flashlights, tape, a crowbar. Things common enough not to look like a crime kit, and useful enough to open locked doors. Eddie stood there for another second, staring at the house. This is giving me a bad feeling, he confessed. Mac lightly tapped him on the shoulder. Every place has its bad moments before it gets right. Let's go. The path to the porch was made of uneven, damp stones. Leaves clung to sneakers. The wooden deck creaked, and the sound seemed loud in that emptiness. Tanya went to a side window, gently pulled back the curtain with 2 fingers, and peeked out. The room was dark, but you could make out the silhouettes of the furniture, a large sofa, a coffee table, a stone fireplace. Everything was tidy, to clean, as if no one breathed there. Nothing was messy, no sign of life. It looks like someone lives here, she said softly. It's not an abandoned house. Eddie swallowed hard. Even better. If you live there, you'll have something. Mac knelt by the front door, examining the lock. It wasn't your average neighborhood lock. It was sturdy, modern. The whole house had that understated air of money well spent, without ostentation. The side window had a reinforced frame. "This is meticulously crafted," Mac murmured, his pride giving way to unease. Tanya pointed to the side, where there was a smaller door, probably a service door leaves. They walked around the house. The sound of dry leaves underfoot seemed like an alarm. At the back was a porch with a covered barbecue, a wooden bench, and a view of a slope that ended in more trees and a stretch of river below. The service door had a simpler, but still well-made lock. Mac carefully fitted the tool, applying force slowly. There was no rush. Haste was what got people caught. The door slammed shut with a muffled crack. Eddie released the breath he didn't even know he was holding. They went inside. The interior smelled of wood, cleaning oil, and something metallic in the distance, like a workshop. The kitchen was spacious, with a dark granite countertop and stainless steel appliances. A mug sat on the dish rack. A folded cloth lay beside the sink, the kind of small detail that made the house seem inhabited, but empty. Tanya pointed the flashlight into the hallway. No noise, no talking. Mac nodded in agreement. Eddie tried to smile, but it came out awkwardly. They started with the living room. The fireplace had old ashes. Above it, a simple clock and a photo turned face down, as if someone had placed it there and then given up looking. The walls had a few picture frames, but nothing flashy. Instead of decoration, there was functionality: a bookshelf with history books, folded maps, an old radio, a blanket folded on the arm of the sofa. And then Tanya saw what made her stomach sink. On the wall, near the stairs, there was a low shelf with objects neatly arranged, a worn cap with an embroidered symbol, a medal inside a box, and a small metal plate. She moved the light closer. The symbol on the cap was familiar even to someone who had never set foot in a military barracks. A stylized eagle and lettering she recognized from news reports and films, but which there seemed surreal. Mac approached and frowned. "What is this?" Tanya didn't answer right away. She read the sign slowly. U.S. Navy, Special Warfare. Silence filled the hallway. Eddie came from behind, trying to understand. "What does it say?" Tanya turned her head and stared at the two of them, her face paler than before. "This isn't just a rich person's house." Her voice was low and serious. "The owner was a SEAL." Mac let out a short laugh, as if the statement were an exaggeration. "Oh, come on. Half the country buys that stuff in souvenir shops. The guy might just be a patriot." Tanya shone her flashlight on the metal, which had a name engraved on it and a small number that looked like official identification. She wasn't an expert, but she wasn't stupid. It didn't look like a replica. Eddie felt his throat go dry. "So, shall we go?" Mac looked around, as if searching for the part that justified his fear. "The house is empty. We're inside. Are you going to give up now because of a hat?" Tanya opened her mouth to reply, but stopped, because a sound came from upstairs. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't random creaking of wood. It was something more subtle, a very light click, followed by a silence that seemed calculated, as if someone had just closed a door, without any hurry. The three of them stood motionless, breathing shallowly. Eddie blinked several times, trying to convince his body to move. Max slowly reached for his backpack, as if the tool could turn into courage. Tanya raised her flashlight, pointing it towards the stairs. And then, at the top of the first flight of stairs, a shadow appeared, not running, not shouting, not making a scene, just occupying space, as if it had always been there. A male voice, controlled and low, came down the hallway and entered them like ice. "You have 10 seconds to tell me why you're in my house." Eddie felt his legs wobble. Tanya squeezed the flashlight tightly. Mac opened his mouth, but no joke came out, because, in that tone, there was no performative threat. There was certainty, and for the first time since they stopped the car in the woods, the three of them understood the same thing at the same time. They hadn't broken into an empty place. They had entered the territory of someone who knew exactly what to do in the dark, and now he had already decided how that meeting was going to end. The silence that followed the sentence was heavier than the sound of the sentence itself. Eddie tried to count mentally, but lost his rhythm at 2. His heart was pounding so hard it seemed to betray his position. The shadow at the top of the stairs didn't move, and that was the most terrifying thing. There was no hesitation, no surprise, just control. The voice said, without raising its tone. Mac raised his hands slowly, his grease-stained fingers trembling slightly. Hey, calm down, he said, too quickly. We got confused. You thought the house was empty, too. Tanya took a step forward without realizing it. Instinct screamed at her to run, but something about that man about the time he controlled made running seem like the worst possible option. The back door was open, she lied. Her voice firm despite her fear. We went in the wrong way. It was a mistake. 3. The shadow finally moved forward a little, revealing part of the body. There was no visible weapon, but the way he descended one step at a time, stepping precisely where the wood didn't creak, made it clear the weapon didn't need to be on display. Eddie's mouth felt dry. Please, he tried. We're leaving now. 4. The man reached the middle of the stairs. Now his face was visible. His 40s, maybe 50. Unshaven, short hair with gray strands. His eyes weren't wide or furious. They were assessing him. You came in with tools, he said, as if commenting on the weather. You didn't come in lost. 5. Max swallowed hard. Okay. We came to get things to sell. That's all. We didn't hurt anyone. The man tilted his head slightly, as if fitting a piece into a puzzle. 6. Tanya realized too late that he was telling the story not to them, but to himself. The backpack on the floor, he ordered, pointing with his chin. Now. Mac hesitated for half a second. Half a second was too long. 7. Okay. Mac dropped his backpack, which fell with a dry thud onto the carpet. It's on the floor. The cell phone, the man said. All 3 of them. Eddie took his cell phone out of his pocket with trembling hands and placed it on the coffee table. Tanya did the same. Mac hesitated, but obeyed. 8. The man took another step and was now at the same level as them, just a few meters away. Even without a visible weapon, Eddie had a clear feeling that any wrong move would end there. Turn around, he continued. Hands on your head. New. They obeyed. 10. The final act wasn't accompanied by gunfire or shouting. It was accompanied by action. Into seconds that seemed blurry, the man crossed the space between them with an impossible speed to follow. Eddie felt a firm pressure on his wrist, then the impact of his body against the wall. There was no immediate pain, only the air being ripped from his lungs. Tanya was pushed to the ground, immobilized with a knee in her back, her arm twisted behind her with surgical precision. Mac instinctively tried to turn, and the mistake proved costly. A sharp blow behind the knee sent him crashing down, followed by another to the back of the neck that extinguished any chance of reaction. In less than 15 seconds, the 3 were on the ground, breathless, immobilized with plastic cable ties that appeared from who knows where. The man was breathing steadily, as if he had just climbed a flight of stairs, not neutralized 3 invaders. Nobody shouted, he said, standing up. Good sign. It means we can still talk. Eddie felt his face burning against the carpet. Are you going to call the police? He asked, his voice muffled. There was a pause. Perhaps. The man stepped away, picked up the cell phones from the table, and turned them off one by one. Then he walked to the kitchen and returned with a bottle of water, which he placed on the floor near them. You're in an area where the nearest patrol car takes, on average, 40 minutes to arrive, he said. At night, sometimes even longer. Tanya closed her eyes. So, why haven't you called yet? The man crouched down in front of them, within their field of vision. Because first I need to understand one thing, she replied. Did you choose this house by chance? Or did someone point it out? Silence returned. Mac was breathing heavily, regaining consciousness. Nobody pointed it out, he murmured. We found it on the internet. Old ad. Isolated house. The man stared at his face for a few seconds that were far too long. That was a poorly rehearsed lie, he said, without anger. But I won't insist on it now. He stood up, went to the shelf, and picked up the photo that was face down. Eddie couldn't see who was in it, but he noticed something change in the man's body. His shoulders dropped a millimeter, almost imperceptible. Do you think I live here because I like silence? He asked, more to himself than to them. I live here because I learned what happens when you trust people too much. Tanya opened her eyes. "You were in the military," she said. "We saw it." "I went," he confirmed. "And I left things behind that I don't like to be remembered." He looked at them again. "You have two options now. The first, I call the police, hand over everything exactly as it happened, and you deal with the system. Prison, criminal record, the rest of your lives even more difficult than they already are." Max swallowed hard. "And the second one?" The man remained silent for a few seconds, as if weighing his own answer. "The second thing is, you tell me the truth," he said. "Who told you about this house? Why? And what did you think you would find here?" Eddie felt something worse than fear, shame. "We just wanted money," he said. "There was no grand plan. There was nobody behind it." The man stared at him. "Money makes ordinary people commit extraordinary mistakes," he replied. "I know this better than I'd like to admit." He walked to the window and slightly parted the curtain, observing the darkness of the forest. "Do you think you're the first ones trying to get in here?" The three remained silent. "They're not," he continued, "and everyone thought the house was empty." He turned around, his eyes now hard again. "The difference is that you're still breathing." The sentence hung in the air heavy. "Rest," he said finally. "The night isn't over yet, and the decision isn't either." He turned off the light in the room, leaving only a dim lamp in the hallway. In the partial darkness, tied to the floor of a house they should never have found, Eddie, Mac, and Tanya understood something fundamental. The worst was yet to come, and somehow, the former SEAL seemed to be deciding whether they deserved to leave there alive or free. The dim light from the hallway cast long shadows that seemed to move with the breath of the house. Eddie lost track of time. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. With his hands clasped behind his head and his body tense, each second had its own weight. The man returned without making a sound. He had changed his clothes. Now he was wearing a dark long-sleeved t-shirt and sturdy trousers, the kind that don't attract attention, but last for years. On his feet, worn boots, carefully cleaned. He wasn't someone improvising. He was someone who was always prepared. He crouched down again before them, holding a cloth and a small first aid kit. "Before anyone does something stupid," he said, "let's sort out the basics." Without asking permission, he cleaned the small cut on Eddie's eyebrow, the result of the impact against the wall. The touch was firm, professional, without cruelty. That was more confusing than violence. "My name is Daniel Cross," he said, as he worked. "Not that that changes much." Tanya's eyes widened slightly. "You live here alone?" Daniel paused briefly. "Yes, today." He moved to Mac, whose neck was stiff and whose gaze was downcast. He examined him, testing his reflexes with 2 fingers. "You were lucky," he commented. "If I had reacted half a second later, I would have broken something that can't be put back together." Max swallowed hard. "Thank you, I guess." Daniel didn't answer. He finished the makeshift bandage and stood up. "You want to know why you're still here," he said. "And I want to know why you keep lying." Eddie took a deep breath. "We're not lying." Daniel walked to the table, unfolded a map, and spread it out. There were handwritten markings, trails, back roads, high points. "This house hasn't been listed in active ads for years," he said. "It doesn't appear on common websites. The access method you used isn't the most obvious." He looked up. "Someone told me where to go in." Tanya looked away first. "Okay," she said. "It wasn't someone. It was a comment." Daniel waited. "Forum," she continued. "People talking about detached houses. One guy commented that it was easy here. Said the owner didn't stay very long." Daniel felt his stomach clench. He didn't show it. Name: anonymous user. Like everyone else. He closed his eyes for a moment. A single moment. Eddie noticed. "So it wasn't by chance," Daniel said. "And that changes things." He picked up the map and walked away, pacing the room as if organizing his thoughts, not the space. "Do you know what happens when a house becomes an online comment?" he asked. "It stops being a house. It becomes a target." Mac lifted his face. "Have you been through this before?" Daniel stopped in front of the fireplace. "I've been through worse," he replied. "But this is different. This involves choices." He took the photo down from the mantelpiece and, for the first time, didn't turn it around. He placed it on the floor, facing them. It was a woman, smiling, sitting on the same porch they had stepped on hours before. The smile was calm every day. Normal life. Laura, Daniel said. My wife. The silence became respectful, heavy in a new way. She died 3 years ago, he continued. Not here. But it was because of things that started long before. The kind of life I led. Tanya felt a lump in her throat. I am really sorry. Daniel nodded, without apparent emotion. After I left the Navy, I thought distance solved everything. That isolation was protection. He gave a bitter half-smile. But the past doesn't respect fences. He looked at them again. People started showing up. First curious onlookers, then opportunists. And now you. Eddie spoke, almost in a whisper. We didn't know anything about this. I know, Daniel replied. And that's why you're still breathing. He approached again, getting himself to their eye level. But now you know. And that creates a different problem. What's the problem? Mac asked. Daniel took a deep breath. You're not a professional threat. You're not organized criminals. You're broken people trying to survive. He paused. But you saw things here. You heard things. And someone out there might want to know what you found out. Tanya understood before the others. Do you think that whoever commented on the forum wants to test the house? I'm sure of it, Daniel said. And you were the test. Eddie's heart raced. So what are you going to do with us? Daniel remained silent for several long seconds. Then he spoke clearly. I'm going to call the police. But not now. Mac's eyes widened. What? Before that, you're going to help me close this door, Daniel continued. The same door that let you in here. Tanya frowned. How can I help? Daniel leaned in, his gaze serious, without empty threat. You're going to tell me everything you know. Every detail about the forum, the comments, the names that appear. He paused. And you're going to stay here until I'm sure no one else is coming tonight. Eddie felt a chill run down his spine. And then what? Daniel held his gaze. Then, I'll decide whether to hand over 3 repentant invaders, or 3 witnesses who chose to do the right thing. The wind blew hard outside, making the house creak. Trapped, exhausted, and now embroiled in something far bigger than a poorly planned robbery, Eddie, Mac, and Tanya understood that this night was no longer about escaping. It was about who they would be when the sun rose. Dawn was breaking slowly, as if time itself had decided to observe. Daniel first released Tanya's hands, then Eddie's, and finally Mac's. He didn't remove the handcuffs completely, just loosened them enough so they could move without running. A calculated balance between trust and control. Any stupid attempt, he said, ends quickly. Don't try it. No one answered. There was no room for bravado. They sat down at the kitchen table. Daniel put the coffee on to brew, the sound of the machine echoing loudly in the silence of the house. Outside, the wind rustled the treetops, creating a constant, almost hypnotic sound. It starts from the beginning, Daniel said, looking at Tanya. The forum. She took a deep breath. It's not just one website. It's several. Places where people comment on opportunities, gray areas, empty houses, schedules, routines. She hesitated, but that address appeared more than once, always with the same tone, as if someone wanted to draw attention. What's the name? Daniel asked. Ridgewalker. The coffee had finished brewing. Daniel poured it into 3 mugs and pushed them toward them. Drink up. You'll need to stay awake. Mac took a sip and grimaced. This Ridgewalker, did he describe the house? Not directly, Tanya replied. She was talking about isolation, about an owner who's too disciplined, about someone who doesn't call the police. Daniel didn't react, but Eddie noticed his jaw clenching. How many times? Daniel asked. At least for different topics, Tanya said. In different months. And did anyone answer? Yes. Always curious. Some asked questions. Others tried to brag. She swallowed hard. One commented that he was going to take a look last week. The silence fell like a physical weight. And he came back to tell us? Daniel asked. No. Daniel walked to the window and drew back the curtain just enough to see the edge of the woods. The darkness was dense, alive. You weren't the first, he said. But you were the first to enter together. Eddie felt his stomach churn. Do you think there's anyone out there right now? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He listened. He remained motionless for long seconds, his head slightly tilted, as if deciphering something that the others couldn't perceive. Then he said, yes. Mac felt a chill. How do you know? Daniel stepped away from the window and began to move around the house, turning off some lights and turning on others in strategic locations. Because the forest changes when someone decides to stand still, he replied, and someone out there stood still. He picked up an old radio from the shelf and turned it on. A low hissing sound filled the air. Eddie, come with me, he said. You're going to hold the flashlight. Me? Eddie choked. You, Daniel confirmed. I need eyes that aren't addicted to the dark. Tanya stood up instinctively. I can't, no, Daniel interrupted. You stay with Mac. If you hear anything strange, anything at all, bang on the table 3 times loud. Eddie followed Daniel to the back door. The cold air rushed in immediately, bringing with it the smell of earth and crushed leaves. Walk exactly where I step, Daniel said quietly. And don't light anything unless I tell you to. They moved a few meters outside the house. Eddie's flashlight trembled slightly, but he kept it pointed downwards, as instructed. Daniel knelt down near the edge of the balcony and pointed. Do you see this? Eddie squinted. In the damp mud, there was a fresh mark, a sole too defined to be old. Someone stayed there, Eddie whispered. He was watching, Daniel corrected. Long enough to leave a mark. He stood up slowly. Go back inside. And him? Eddie asked, panic leaking from his voice. Daniel didn't answer. He just made a firm gesture. When they entered, Tanya and Mac were standing there, tense. He's not alone, Daniel said. And he didn't come to steal. So what did you come for? Mac asked. Daniel picked up their backpack and opened it, spreading the contents out on the table. Among the usual tools, there was something that none of the 3 remembered putting there. A small tracker, about the size of a coin, attached with tape. Tanya's blood ran cold. This isn't ours. Daniel nodded slowly. You were followed, he said. From the city. The radio suddenly crackled. A voice emerged from the hiss, low, distorted, but clear enough. Daniel, we know you're there. They all froze. The house is no longer invisible. The voice continued. You can keep hiding, or we can settle this the hard way. Daniel calmly turned off the radio. It seems the night has taken a different turn, he said. And then he looked at the 3 of them, seriously. Now you're not just witnesses, he said. You're part of the problem. The wind lashed against the house, causing the windows to vibrate. And for the first time, Eddie understood that this was no longer Daniel's house. It was a point scored, and someone out there had decided to settle accounts with the past. The silence after the broadcast was absolute. Daniel remained motionless for a few seconds, as if his body were reviewing old protocols before acting. Then he began to move, not quickly, but decisively. Change of plan, he said. From now on, nobody does anything without my permission. He walked to a built-in cabinet in the hallway and opened it. Inside, nothing that looked like a movie arsenal. Nothing extravagant. Just enough: a worn vest, a well-maintained pistol, 2 magazines, a tactical flashlight, wired headphones. Eddie felt his stomach clench. Is all this because of us? Daniel closed the locker and stared at Eddie. No, he replied. It's because of who came after you. He pointed to the open backpack on the table. This tracking device isn't amateurish. Whoever installed it knew what they were doing. They knew you would get here. Tanya ran her hand over her face, trying to organize her fear. So we're bait. They were used as a gateway, Daniel corrected. The difference is that now they know about it. Mac let out a nervous laugh. Great. I've always wanted to be part of something bigger. Daniel did not react. You have a choice, he said seriously. And it's the last real one tonight. The 3 fell silent. Option 1, you go out on the North Trail. Now, I'll disable the tracker, erase as much of your footsteps as possible, and you run. If it works, you'll never speak of this place again. If it doesn't, he paused, you already know. And what about option 2? Eddie asked. Daniel took a deep breath. You stay, help me, do exactly what I tell you. And when this is over, I'll call the police myself. I'll tell them everything, including who came after you. Tanya frowned. How can I help? Daniel looked at her, assessing her, observing, listening, following simple instructions. He tilted his head. You are not soldiers, but sometimes 3 ordinary people make all the difference because they don't think like those accustomed to violence. Mac looked at Eddie, then at Tanya. If we leave, they'll come after us, she said. Daniel nodded. They go. So staying is dangerous too, Tanya added. Yes, Daniel agreed. But I know every angle here. The wind picked up again. A branch scraped against the side of the house, causing everyone to jump in shock. Eddie felt the weight of the decision descend upon him like something physical. We'll stay, he said, before thinking too much. Mac closed his eyes for a second and nodded. I've done worse for less. Tanya took a deep breath. If we're going to stay, I want to know the truth. Daniel stared at her. About what? About them, she said. And about you. Daniel was silent for a few seconds. Then he spoke. They're not thieves. They're not onlookers. He adjusted his vest. They're people who lost something because of me. Old operation. Wrong decision. Dead people. The air seemed to grow heavier. And now they want. What? Eddie asked. They want confirmation, Daniel replied. They want to know if I'm still the man they remember. He walked over to the table and spread the map out again. They're not going to invade the house, he continued. They're going to test, pressure, wait for someone to make a mistake. He pointed to 3 spots around the property. Here, here, and here. He looked at Tanya. You'll stay by the east window. Just watch. Don't open the curtains too much. Then, for Mac, you sit with me in the back. Don't talk. Just do what I do. Finally, he faced Eddie. You will hear it. Listen to what? Eddie asked. Daniel put the headphones on Eddie's ears, connected to the radio. All. The first crack came 10 minutes later. A dry sound, distant, like wood breaking. They're moving, Daniel murmured. Another sound, closer. Tanya spoke softly from the window. There's light, very faint, between the trees. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if accepting something inevitable. The time has come. He positioned himself near the back door, breathing heavily. Mac tried to imitate him, failing visibly. Remember, Daniel said, without looking back, you're not the target. I am. The radio hissed in Eddie's ear. The same voice from the forest returned, now closer, clearer. Last chance, Daniel. We just want to talk. Daniel pressed the button and responded for the first time. You chose the wrong house. The silence that followed was not empty. He was expectant, and hidden among trees and shadows, the men of the past took the first step. The night was decided. The first shot didn't come from the house. It came from the forest. A dry, controlled bang, followed by the splintering of wood on the side of the shed. It wasn't a warning. It was a measurement. Eddie felt the sound pass through his body before reaching his ears. Daniel didn't move. They want to know if I still think before I react, he murmured. Good question. He gestured quickly for Mac to duck down and, without haste, turned off the last interior light in the house. The darkness became complete, broken only by the distant glow of the moon filtered through the trees. Tanya, he whispered into the internal radio, describes. Only describes. Her voice was tense, but firm. 3, no, for silhouettes. Spaced out. They're not advancing together. They're closing in slowly. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the past was no longer there. Only the present. Eddie, listen, he said. If something goes wrong, you run along the North Trail. Don't look back. And you? Eddie asked, his voice faltering. I'll stay. The response wasn't heroic. It was definitive. The second shot came closer. A clean, calculated shot, hitting the empty living room window. Glass shattering in the darkness. They want to force me to leave, Daniel said. It won't work. He moved like a shadow, exiting through the side door without a sound. Max stood motionless, his face pale, trying to control his breathing. He's going to die, Mac whispered. No, Tanya replied over the radio. They don't want to kill. They want to break. Eddie's radio crackled. You always liked playing the ghost, Cross, said the familiar voice. But everyone leaves footprints. Daniel answered calmly from outside. You're already leaving yours behind. What happened next wasn't a chaotic exchange of gunfire. It was deconstruction. One man fell without a cry, struck from behind, immobilized before he even understood where it came from. Another stumbled on terrain Daniel knew better than his own backyard. A third tried to flank and found only emptiness and the fear of not knowing where the enemy was. The last one stopped. Eddie heard his breathing through the open radio. Rapid, uncontrolled. It didn't have to be this way, the voice said, now unfiltered. We just wanted you off the map. Daniel appeared on the edge of the clearing, now visible, on purpose. I'm off the map, he replied. You're the ones who insisted on looking for me. There was a long pause. The wind passed between them as witness. Then it ends, said the man. Daniel took a step forward. It's over. The man dropped the weapon. Minutes later, distant sirens began to echo through the valley. Not called by Daniel, called by someone who realized too late that the night had spiraled out of control. When the police arrived, they found 4 men surrendered in the forest and 3 invaders sitting on the kitchen floor. Exhausted, but alive. Daniel was leaning against the porch, his hands visible, his face marked by the weariness that only comes after everything is over. The testimony was long, true, complete. Daniel didn't hide anything, neither the past, nor the mistakes, nor the reason for choosing that place to disappear. Eddie, Mac, and Tanya were held accountable for their actions. There was no miraculous absolution, but there was context, cooperation, a path that still existed. When the sun rose, the house seemed smaller, less strength, more wounded home. Before they were taken away, Tanya looked at Daniel. Are you going to stay here? Daniel observed the line of trees, now ordinary again. No, he replied. Houses only work when they don't need to be defended all the time. Eddie nodded, understanding more than he would have liked. Months later, that house ceased to exist in the forums. It became a poorly told rumor, an unconfirmed story. Daniel Cross has disappeared again, but not like before. Because that night, amidst wrong choices and late decisions, something became clear to everyone involved. It wasn't force that decided who came out of that house alive. It was the control, and the choice not to become what the past demanded. END.